Hi, and welcome back to Footnotes. I'm Tshego Mosiane, founder and lead strategist here at Reconnected Group Africa, a research and intelligence-based business consultancy focused on rural development in Southern Africa. Footnotes is our informational series, where we cover strategic issues that investors, entrepreneurs, and executives operating in Africa will eventually have to face. Each episode focuses on a specific topic that's shaping how business is done on the continent. And we're here to help you understand why it matters, how to leverage it, and how to position yourself early. Today's topic is food production for the future. Food production, food security, and nutrition are major hot topics right now in African business and investment. This topic is not necessarily about the food itself, but how to build sustainable, scalable businesses where we can take raw materials and process them into finished products. In recent years, food businesses and food brands have become more trendy. And more of the world's investors are looking to African entrepreneurs and businesses who understand food production. But food production is a high cost, high labor venture. And therefore, it makes it very hard for the typical entrepreneur to start a food brand and scale it long term. And I'm not talking about cottage businesses where you basically make food at home in small batches and sell it to your nearby community. I'm talking about how do African entrepreneurs build scalable food businesses across different food products. We started looking into this topic after a survey that we did on different rural entrepreneurs based in different parts of Southern Africa. And one of the industries of interest and concern is food products and food production. A lot of places in rural areas are too far for typical large conglomerate brands to consider them as legitimate markets. And as such, that means a lot of people in rural areas, when they go to the store, they are not receiving the same high quality products as people in larger metropolitan areas. This has a direct effect on local nutrition and in general the quality of products available in local shops, tuck shops, and malls. And although there are various programs promising to address these issues, we at Reconnected Group were noticing a gap between what is preached and what is experienced on the ground. This means that there is ample opportunity on paper in rural areas to build a food business or food brand. But somehow the local entrepreneurs who try really struggle to structure their supply chain, access funding, and enter the market. So, in order to better understand the gap between what is being preached and the reality on the ground, we decided to reach out to someone with decades of experience in food production. Riël Malan, he is an entrepreneur, private equity executive, and a partner at Exeo Capital. He is also chairman of Nurture Brands, which is the company that produces multiple food products like vital vitamins. In this conversation, Riël and I discuss some of these gaps between teachings and reality and better ways for rural entrepreneurs to structure their food businesses for long-term growth, investment opportunities, and scale. Hello, Mr. Malan. How are you?
How are you doing, Tshego?
I'm
I'm
good.
good, and
I'm
you?
good. So today I have called you here because I would like to have a conversation following up on the one we had earlier this year about building a sustainable supply chain. This year I've been talking to a lot of entrepreneurs who want to get into like producing juice and baked goods and things and cheese and things like that. But I think a lot of the advice that people get or a lot of the teachings in school is very limiting. And I just want to talk about that. I just want to talk about like the pros and cons of trying to build manufacturing or like small uh, product brands in rural areas and the the barriers, sorry, that a lot of rural developers face in like building out their supply chain.
Yep. And so manufacturing is tough, as you know. So specifically, I think when you are in the rural areas, it's even tougher. So manufacturing, I mean, if you break it down to what makes manufacturing successful is usually number one, you need to be the best in the world at what you do. So that's why the likes of China and these big manufacturing hubs are standing up so much. I mean, they've been spending a lot of capital for decades on becoming the best at electric car manufacturing or, whatever they're doing, plastic molding. So that's the first one. I mean, secondly, your product needs to have a real point of difference. So something that only you make, something that is patented to you, something that is from your area. So that's the second part of it. The second generally successful trait of a sound manufacturing operation. And thirdly would be where there's a regional advantage. So you can manufacture something because you're in a region, and a good example of that would be water or beer. So you can't transport water too far. You can't transport Drakensberg water down to the Cape. It's just too far. There's sources closer to the Cape where we can use water. So somewhere in manufacturing, you need to sort of fit into one of those three buckets in order if you want to be really successful at manufacturing. Now, rural areas specifically has usually a disadvantage because they're far from the market. And that which can be really, the real points of difference are things that are difficult to come by. So I mean, I mentioned to you a point of difference as an example in a rural area would be we're in supplement manufacturing. So if you find this herbal cough mixture that, a gogo in the Northwest or wherever's been using for 2 generations, and you can commercialize that as something that is unique to that area, as a root, preferably of a tree or a plant that's used in it. So that would be an example of something that is really unique for in that area.
Mm. Mm. So true. Because I think, because I have a cousin who's going through like one of the Sifter programs. So like one of those government-backed programs. And I want to get your opinion on like kind of like what they're teaching them. So like they're teaching him kind of like to set up his own like juice manufacturing factory type thing in like an office park around here, very small, using, recycled JoJo tanks and things like that in place of like professional um, equipment that's like more expensive and things like that. He says that he wants to supply, like catering events, so he could do it like per order instead of like mass production, right? So
Yeah.
I see a lot of that advice, and I think, I mean, it solves a temporary problem, but like, how does someone like that manage to scale once they can access manufacturing places? Because I understand that they do it because um, there's a lack of manufacturers in this local area. Like we don't have a factory taking orders nearby. But I just wonder, I don't know, maybe it's just like my lack of experience as well, is like these government programs are kind of saying that we're teaching you to be self-sufficient, but does that exclude you from scaling in the future?
Yeah. I think it's got a lot to do with the kind of product that you go after. So look at something like juice. It really is a commodity. It is something, I mean, what makes your orange juice better than my orange juice, better than the next guy's orange juice, as an example. And there's a bit of differentiation, I suppose, that you can bring in. You can bring in that, it's from the area, and you can bring in that it's an emerging business person that's doing it. But fundamentally, if you're going to the catering trade, somebody who has a restaurant wants to get the best orange juice at the cheapest possible price. So I think you start with the product that you are producing, and then have a look at, well, how can you differentiate that? I mean, how differentiable is that actually? And the problem that I have with something like juice as an example is that it's a globally traded commodity. It's a waste product often, so you find that it's not really done on commercial basis. It's a waste product. It needs to be moved away, and therefore people press the juice and they sell it at any possible price that they can find it. So it's always a market that's quite depressed. So I would be very cautious to to endorse something like that, because I think it's just you're setting somebody up in a substandard factory. I don't know, maybe it is a super tech factory. I don't know, but if it is a small factory, you're setting them up in a small factory to compete against these global giants, and I think that potentially could set somebody up to fail. Um, so for me, it always starts with the product. It always starts with in what market are you competing. You need to decide upfront on which football field you play. What is the football field? Are you playing in commodities? Or are you playing in niche products? If you're playing commodities, you have to be efficient enough to compete against national and global giants. If you have a niche product, you might be able to do something that is quite different.
So you were talking about differentiating factors, and then last time we spoke about like cooperative supply chains and things like that. I think like from what I'm noticing is people have come to the idea, and I think it's like tenderpreneurship that's also part of the problem, is that like a cooperative or a more community-based supply chain is like a waste of time. I have to deal with all these people, da 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 da. But I'm always trying to be like, but that can be the differentiating factor, right? Because I mean, if you're going to be using, like, we're just using juice for an example, but if you're just going to be using, resources from your area anyway, and you're using a cooperative that could, build a lot of content. You could do a whole podcast. You could do a documentary even. And I think that there's a mentality of like entrepreneurship is bulk orders, like tenderpreneurship style, like 1,000 bottles for a Kosi's wedding type of thing. But I think the mentality should be more supply chain building based, instead of trying to
Yeah.
push push out something. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, cooperative supply chains is globally and over the years is proven to be great where communities and groups of people start up together. I mean, it was post World War II in Europe. You saw co-ops jumping up everywhere because the infrastructure was depleted and people had to build it together. A single person couldn't build the infrastructure, so 10 or 20 or 30 came together to build a wine cooperative or a cheese cooperative, or sometimes even just a retail cooperative. There are still a number of retailers in Europe that are cooperatives where people came together and joined forces, bulk buying, and all these aspects. So cooperative supply chains is a very good idea in my mind in the rural areas specifically where capital still needs to be built. And I think if there's a something that I think government should be supporting, it is cooperative supply chains and co-ops for that matter. Even if you go back to, I mean, apartheid South Africa with the old national government, the white farmer cooperatives, post World War II, post the Great Depression, that is what was set up. They built silos together for them. Those cooperatives would borrow money from government and then distribute that money to its members on a more efficient way than an individual wanting to go and get a loan. So I think there's a lot to learn from cooperatives, and if you can find 10, 20, 30 like-minded people producing the same thing or wanting to produce the same thing or wanting to do the same thing, there's it's a great way to do it. I mean, I studied many moons ago at the University of Stellenbosch, and I actually had a semester subject on cooperative theory. So and there's so much written about it. So very a very worthwhile, I think, avenue for entrepreneurs who maybe find they don't have enough capital, or they want to bulk up on something to get 10 or 20 people around the table and to look at that. Yeah.
Thank you for saying I am right. that will definitely
Yeah.
be in the final cut for sure. Yeah, I think
I mean, the thing is just sort of maybe just on that point that you're being right. I think it's one thing in South Africa at the moment that with all the political and historical bullshit, if you push all of that aside, there are principles that work. I mean, it works internationally. It works in a small scale, large scale. And I mean, what entrepreneurs and what South Africans need to move towards is to say what worked in the past, and let's duplicate that. Why we want to fix something that ain't broke, and try and emulate and try and build
just
on that. And I
upgrade.
think it's a great philosophical view on life is to go and see what worked for, you know, things might have not been good in the apartheid years, but certain things did work. So what worked and how can we emulate that? It's not necessarily bad because it was successful in that time. Some of the stuff was, but something like cooperative supply chains, a wonderful idea.
But I think a great example of that is the cooperatives in Limpopo. A lot of people don't know that like a big push for the
Yeah.
Limpopo resurgence, economic resurgence, was the Kosis there took on a lot of cooperative projects. The chiefs there, a lot more than any other chiefs in like district wise
Mm.
in the country. So, like you're saying, it was like a cluster who took on these decisions.
Mm.
And they had their own supply chains, their own supermarkets, their own product lines, their own this. That obviously took up a very small
Mm.
percentage, maybe 5% of their overall economy, but that boosted the economy now that it's getting more political attention, more international investment, and things like that.
And collective bargaining makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
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 So here are the strategic takeaways for entrepreneurs, investors, and executives trying to build such a business in Africa. Number one, you do not have to do this alone. When we look at modern day business content and even a lot of business courses, they preach for people to follow a more individualistic approach to business. Instead, rather build with cooperative structures. This will allow you to pool resources and structure your business in a way that benefits all involved. This also helps you cut costs in between each step because instead of transferring from one company to another, it's more so one overall supply chain. The second takeaway would be to look to make something truly unique. This will give you a true unique product if you're specifically using indigenous plants that grow in your area. And when it comes to food, that is a very untapped market in Africa, with so many indigenous plants used for various kinds of health issues that much of the world doesn't even know about, whether it's using certain types of beans, cactus, wheat, different kinds of crops, not the stereotypical that any large conglomerate can copy. And lastly, I think the most important thing is a change in mindset. Instead of looking at the rural areas as a hindrance, think of it as an asset. If you are into food products, it means by extension you are dealing with issues of nutrition and environmental conservation. And once you can understand that, you can step towards building a truly unique product with sustainable practices, a mutually beneficial supply chain with a high export value. Entrepreneurs in the world of food production and food products who understand this conversation are already in a place to strategically benefit from the changes in trade laws, regulations around traceability, and changing consumer behavior towards nutrition in the coming years. So, yeah, thank you all so much for watching this footnote. If you are an investor, entrepreneur, or executive interested in building more resilient strategies for your African business, definitely reach out to us at Reconnected Group Africa and find out how we can help you navigate through the maze.